What is going on, my friends? I hope you are doing well today. The team at TRE wants to say thank you so much for all the support. Thank you for joining today. This is the Real Estate Podcast, and we want you guys to do us a solid. If you don't mind, can you help us get the message out? We believe that real estate can be for anybody, and we believe there's opportunities for people to grow with us. So if you can, please share, subscribe, like, comment. Thank you for being here on our journey, and we are going to continue to add as much value as we possibly can and try to shake up the industry. Let's dive in.
Other revenue streams, Matt, you mentioned it, and I think it's super important, and not just earning wages through commissions, but also building wealth through investing. Mm-hmm. And way too many real estate agents don't own real estate, or don't own enough real estate, or don't take advantage of the opportunities that they come across because they aren't financially in a position to be able to do it, because they haven't built their business to a level where they have that enough cash flow to make investments.
Welcome to the Real Estate Podcast. It is Monday morning. We're getting after today. Really honored and blessed to have Chris Heller here. And I think there's a lot we can learn from you personally. And we're just pumped up, man. And if you don't mind, we'd love to just kind of jump in here. Chris has been in the business for a long time, has a real estate team, number one producer at KW, became the CEO of KW, entrepreneurial, right? CEO of multiple companies, and really excited because we love business, me and Alex, and there's a lot we can learn. And if the goal for us here is to provide value to entrepreneurs, but at the same time, help you out, right? And I know you got a new book that we'd like to talk about. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to kind of just dive into your journey through real estate, and we'll just ask questions and go from there.
Are you sure? It's a long journey.
Let's do it, man.
I got my license when I was 20 years old. My dad, I was a sophomore in college. My dad called me and said, hey, you're going to get your real estate license and come up to Lake Tahoe for the summer and work with me. He was managing a timeshare resort. I did that. And then eventually moved to San Diego and did the same thing. And while I was doing that, I met a real estate broker, and he immediately tried to get me to get into residential real estate. And it only took him 3 years to convince me. 3 years of calling me, sending me note cards every time I saw him, bugging me. And finally, he caught me at a weak moment. I said, all right, I'll give it a try.
Consistency paid off.
Consistency and persistence, yeah. And the personal touch, those handwritten note cards.
Nice.
Became Rookie of the Year my first year. Sold 27 homes. Hired an assistant at the end of my first year, which was back then unheard of. This was 1989, and real estate agents didn't have assistants, especially some young buck in the office with all the older agents. But it just made sense. I saw these agents, and I was spending a lot of time stuffing envelopes and folding letters and everything else. And I thought, I could pay someone to do this and go out and sell more homes. And I did. And teams weren't a thing then. It wasn't a concept, but that was the beginning of a team. The next year I hired I started referring all my buyer leads to a guy from another company who I could tell was really good working with buyers, because he would show my listings and ask smart questions and do good follow-up, and say, hey, how about if I send you all my buyers and you pay me an above market referral fee? And then hired him. So at one point just said, hey, why don't you just come work for me? Mm-hmm. And so that was how the team kept growing. I kept doing more business, needed more people to help with the business, and did that for the same company for 16 years and became one of the top 10 agents in the nation for that company, as a nationwide company. And then joined Keller Williams. Someone gave me a copy of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book and read it and said, oh my gosh, here's a company that's figured it out. They're doing exactly what I'm doing, but it took me 16 years, the hard way, and here it is right in a book. By 2009, I was the number one KW agent in the world, and then in 2010, came to Austin and took an executive role as the president of the worldwide division, which didn't exist. Okay. So my job was then to go build Keller Williams globally, which I did for 5 years, and spread it around the globe, and, opened up over 20 different countries. And then they asked me to become the CEO of the company, which was in 2015. And that was a great experience. Grew the company and the profitability of the company significantly, more than it had ever grown in the previous 30 years. And then 2.5 years later, left without a plan, but ultimately met another self-made billionaire, the founder of Loan Depot, which was the second largest non-bank mortgage company in the world, or in the U.S., and joined them, became the CEO of their sister company called Mellow Home. Back in about 2010, I started getting pretty heavily involved in prop tech and real estate technology. Initially out of necessity, because we had to figure out how to do things globally at Keller Williams and provide technology and have the technology to track what we were doing. And so back in 2016-17, I had invested in a local startup here in Austin called Ojo Labs, and then they'd asked me to become an advisor very quickly, shortly thereafter, and then I became a board member. And then in 2019, they asked me to join them full time, and I did as the chief real estate officer, and been doing that, and then advising some other companies. So
I love it, man.
That's the career.
That's great. There's a lot there that I'd like to dive into. Specifically, like to get started, first year of real estate, right? You said you sold 24 or so?
27.
27?
But who's counting?
I mean, that's, I actually, I can relate in some ways. I got rookie of the year my first year. I was in Corpus Christi, but I think I sold like 8 or 9. And so like, what was your process? I mean, as much as you can dive into specifics, I think that'd be helpful for agents getting started to know, how do you go sell that many houses in the first year?
Yeah. So I didn't know anything. And back then there wasn't YouTube. There weren't videos. Nothing was online yet. So, I was in an office with 60 or 70 agents, and I was just trying to figure out what to do and what real estate was. And I used to go with a manager who was this really old guy. At least he seemed really old. When you're that young, everyone seems old, but I think he was actually really old. And I would go to him and ask him a question, and he would say, "Hey, come back when the other new guys are here," and so I don't have to answer that question more than once. I'd be like, okay. So I started bugging all the other agents.
Nice.
Like, hey, how do you do this? What do you do this? And then finally one day that manager gave me a script, and it was a script for calling for sale by owners. Mm-hmm. And the paper looked like it was from the Civil War days. It was that old. And so I just started following that script. And of the 27 homes I sold that year, 24 of them were for sale by owners that I listed. And that was just, every day, that's what I was working on. So, and I would literally spend, and back then I didn't know any better, nor did I have any other choice. So I was literally working 7 days a week. I was, the broker was an ex-Marine. He used to get in real early, and I always wanted to be the first one in. Mm-hmm. So he would get in like at 6:30. So I was getting in like at 6:15 or 6 o'clock. And I was always the last one to leave, at 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
I love it. I did the exact same thing.
Yeah. I don't know that I recommend that, but
hey, it's good when you're getting started.
Yeah.
You probably would.
Yeah, especially when you don't have any other options.
As long as because I fell into this trap later in my career, it's like you're not just there to say that. Like you're actually getting there and doing it, right? Which obviously you were.
Yeah.
When you're finding those for sale by owners, were you driving around and finding the signs and then?
I was doing two things. So I was that, and I would go through the newspapers every week, cut out the classified ads. I had a little box with index cards in it, and I would file the ads by the first 3 numbers of the phone number, by the prefix of the phone number, because then when I saw a new ad, I wouldn't know if I'd already called or not. So I would just look if it was like a 753 number, then I'd look at all the ones with a 753 number and go, oh, I already have this one. Mm-hmm. But that's how I kept track of them all.
What was your pitch?
My pitch was, hi, this is Chris. I'm a real estate agent with Prudential. I'm calling about the house for sale. And they usually say, well, we're not using agents, or, we're not listing the house. I said, that's not why I'm calling you. I'm calling you because I work with a lot of buyers and sellers in the area. It's part of my job is to know what's available and what's for sale. could you tell me a little bit about it? And they tell me. I said, and where's it located? My goal on that initial call was to do two things. One was to establish if they had motivation, and the second was to decide whether it was one I wanted or not. Like if it was in an area that I didn't want to go to, or type of property I didn't think I could sell, then that was, it ended with that call. Or if I discovered they weren't really motivated, maybe they were just pissed at their neighbor and stuck a for sale sign in the front yard to spite their neighbor, then I'm not going to mess with that. But if they had motivation and it was one I wanted, then at the end of that call, I would end it with, hey, would you be offended if I were to stop by and preview your home? And it's really hard for someone to say, yes, I'd be offended. And then that would get me in front of them. Okay. And I knew early on, just because I watched it happen, that the agent who was in their face the most, I don't mean in their face like in a aggressive or rude way, I mean that was just there, in contact with them the most, is the one that would end up with a listing. And almost all of them ended up listing. Even if they sold, they often fell out of escrow and then would list. So my goal was just to be the one that was there the most. So I would call, send note cards, deliver information. I would do things like I printed out every form that the California Association of Realtors had, and it was like 50 or 60 forms. And I would drop it by and say, hey, here's some of the forms we use when we sell homes. Nice. Thought I'd give them to you in case, when you get an offer, you'll know what to do.
When you're ready to figure out how to fill these out, give me a call.
Yeah. And they would go, look at that and go, holy crap, this is overwhelming. And do other things, give them a list of, hey, here's the best escrow and title companies. And I'd call them usually call them on Mondays after the weekend, because a lot of times they do open houses. And hey, how'd your open house go? How many offers did you get? No, we didn't get any offers. We only had 2 people come in. Really? I'm surprised. We had one this weekend. We had 17 people through, and I think we're getting 2 offers. And that at some point I'd ask them the question, hey, how long are you going to keep doing what you're doing before you'd consider hiring a great agent like myself to help you? And they'd tell me, we're going to give it another 2 weeks, or I don't know, what do you think you can do? And that was the opening that I needed to say, hey, well, why don't we get together and
that's great.
Let me show you.
So, to bring this into right now, what's going on, like at least in Austin, right? You don't really see a ton of for sale by owners. So would you say that, partially was good timing? Obviously you put in the work, but like that strategy might not be as prevalent.
So we can look at it a couple ways. There's always some for sale by owners in any market. But the key, I think the big takeaways are being persistent, being consistent, and then doing something every single day. Lead generation every day, whether you feel like it or not, is the job of real estate agents. Now, how agents choose to do it, there's any number of ways, right? It might be picking up the phones. It might be knocking on doors. It might be through social networks. It might be through social media. It might be through online marketing. There's, you name it, there's a way to do it, but agents need to be. So
same concept, just, not exactly for sale by owners, but obviously it works.
Yeah. I quickly added expired listings to my arsenal, and then it was just for sale by owners and for expired listings every day. Yeah.
I love it. That's great. Well, thanks for that advice. Next thing I kind of want to understand is going from the way I've always been entrepreneurial. I've been in real estate since I was 17. I'm 31. And thinking about CEO from the outside, it's like, I know that, obviously there's a lot of business savvy, obviously tons, but it's not necessarily the way I view it, like super entrepreneurial. And I don't know if that's correct or not, but just understanding like how you shifted from, hey, I'm just getting out here, doing these deals, and now it's more of a corporate type position, what that process was like for you.
Well, it certainly was a big adjustment. It was not a goal. Like, I didn't have this master plan of doing this. I deep down knew that if I got uncommon results, I would get opportunities because of that. And so my goal was always to get, outsized or outcommon results that would lead to more opportunities. And that's really how it happened. I mean, because of the results I was getting, because of the type of businesses I was running, they recognized, hey, you'd be a great person to help build the worldwide division for Keller Williams. Now, they didn't know anything about building a worldwide business. I didn't know anything about, a global business and global real estate. But they knew that I demonstrated all the characteristics of someone that would figure it out and that wouldn't be deterred or stopped by obstacles and would get it done. And they knew me at that moment better than I knew me, because I kept saying, well, why do they think I can do this? Because I don't even know if I can do this. But it was the results I was getting created that opportunity. Then in that role, the results I got doing that, made me sort of the obvious choice to become the CEO of the company when they needed a new CEO.
Sure.
And, and then it was, learning at a really fast pace, what that means and
Sure.
what it's like, when you go from a sole proprietor or an entrepreneur to leading a large company. It's a different dynamic, and then, leadership and leadership skills, become key to the success. And, the concepts of succeeding through other people becomes, necessary, because you can't do it all yourself, right? You become the lid or the ceiling on what you can achieve if it's all on you. So those were things that I adapted to very quickly.
What year was that when they asked you to become CEO?
2015. I became the president of the worldwide division in 2010, and then 5 years of doing that, then 2015.
In 2015, maybe 130,000 agents?
Yeah. Actually, let's see what I left for this. Yeah, it was probably 120 or so.
And so stepping into that role, like you're talking about, being the CEO of the company and then having to lead, downwards, I'm sure is a big adjustment, right? Like you're talking about sole proprietor, kind of hands-on, doing everything yourself, and then now you're managing, I'm sure, departments and departments within the departments, and it's a much bigger shift and a different way of accomplishing things.
Yeah. I always had a team, so I always had, assistants and people that worked for me and led, but this was just on a bigger scale. But the things that worked for me previous worked for me then, and that was just, being very authentic, being very honest, being very straightforward. Those were things that I didn't have to learn. Those were things that I just am. And that those things work. Those things work universally. The skills I had to, get better at or learn were things like, how to manage a lot of different initiatives and a lot of different priorities. You as a small business owner or sole proprietor, you want something done, you just get it done, or you figure out who can do it and you have them do it. In an organization, there's multiple initiatives and different priorities, and sometimes the things that you want you can't get right now, or the cost of doing it would be greater than the benefits of doing it. So you have to understand all those things and prioritize, and then having really specific goals, and then leading the teams, providing that vision, and then leading the teams. Okay, here's how we're going to accomplish those goals.
Did Gary and ownership kind of tell you from, I guess, top down on what the goals were for KW, or was that yours to establish?
It was collaborative. I mean, so Gary never set the specific goals. I don't even know if he knows this, but we were in a meeting, and he did have a goal of having achieving a certain dollar amount of profits, and said, I don't think we can do this in the real estate company, so we need to add other services and other revenue streams. And if we add potentially this revenue stream and increase this one and then increase, we can get to that goal. And I said, I think we can get to that goal with the real estate company. And we did 2 years later. Mm-hmm. But it was him that had the goal, then it was my challenge to figure out how to get us there.
Right.
I'm fascinated by like the the time it takes to get deals done, right? Like I'm always like thinking like, what are these businesses doing? And they announce something, and you're like, that was probably in the works for 5 years. From the point you said that they took notice of you succeeding with your team to you actually getting in that position, is that a 2-year dating process? Like what did that look like?
It actually was a 2-year process, but it wasn't because of them getting to know me or vice versa. It was, I got a phone call in the fall of 2008 by the CEO, Mark Willis, who said, and I was going to be in Austin the next week. He said, hey, when you come to Austin next week, I want to meet with you. And I'll tell you why. We've been for years thinking about expanding internationally. All the other brands, Remax, Century 21, Coldbanker, have been international for 20 years. But we haven't. We haven't for 2 reasons. Number one, Gary didn't want us to go international until we reached a certain plateau here in North America. And then second, we never had the right person, and we think you're the right person to do that. So that was at the fall of 2008. I didn't actually start till May of 2010, partly because we had to reach that goal that Gary set, and we weren't, they weren't ready, and I wasn't ready. So the good news was it gave me 2 years to prepare my team for me to step out of the role of leading that team. Yeah. So I had 2 years to, I already had good systems and models, but now to build the personnel and some of the other infrastructure that needed to happen, so I could step out of it and have that team continue to go and grow. If it didn't, that would be a failure, and sure. I don't like those. But yeah, there was that 2-year period, but it was mostly just a timing issue, not.
Was not that wasn't the first time you talked to? You said his name was Mark?
Mark Wilson? No, he
knew you pretty.
He knew
well.
me, yeah. In 2004, he was instrumental in recruiting me to Keller Williams.
Okay.
I came to Austin and met with him. No, he knew me and saw what I had accomplished from 2004 to 2008 when he called, and then it was then we had 2 years of sort of working behind the scenes to get ready to start in 2010. Yeah. We announced it in February of 2010.
Yeah.
What was one of your biggest takeaways aside from what you mentioned? You learned about managing many different priorities at once. Was there anything you learned specifically in your role as president of the global division and then also CEO that you took with you in your new ventures?
Yeah, I learn things every day, multiple times a day. Specifically with the worldwide stuff and the global stuff, I learned a tremendous amount of how different real estate is done here than just about every other country in the world, and the nuanced differences from one country to another. It was very easy for me I was able to learn pretty quickly just because I knew real estate so well. Like if I went to wherever, Croatia, and to see what the differences were, see what the challenges were of the agents and the brokers, and then be able to say, okay, here's how Keller Williams can help with those challenges. Here's where Keller Williams can be an answer for you to accomplish the goals you want. But in doing so, I learned a lot about the different cultures and different, like I said, nuanced differences of how things are done.
I'm more just kind of meant like yourself in that role. Was there anything you learned about, because you left the CEO role after 2.5 years, right? So then going forward, was it like, if I ever become CEO of, another large company like this again, I'll approach it this way, or I didn't enjoy this about it, but I did enjoy this aspect of it?
Yeah. So good question. Yeah. I learned, in any relationship, business, personal, when that relationship is over, it gives you an opportunity to really examine, the good and the bad. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the things I learned was really take an honest look at what my strengths were and what my weaknesses were, and also understanding what type of dynamics or what type of structure I need to be able to leverage my strengths, or what type of situation would put me in a situation where I'd be dealing with my weaknesses a lot. So I got much more clear on what those strengths and weaknesses were, and then moving forward, making sure that I'm in a situation where I can leverage the strengths, and I'm able to be as productive and effective as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Well, I guess shifting gears a little bit, because you've been around doing real estate for a while. Do you have a take on, or just any kind of passion or vision on kind of what the industry? I know it's kind of a lot to say here, but like what does this industry look like? Like we're building this brokerage. We've got about 150 agents, and our big focus is really support the entrepreneurial spirit. Like commissions are great, but like come here and build your net worth. And the way I'm kind of looking at it, and I'd love to get your take, is that tech's getting very much involved. In some ways, I think some of it's kind of pointless. Obviously, some of it is very valuable. But we're like, let's go build the true real estate professionals and not just an agent. Partially, it's like the agent, at least from where I'm looking, like in some sense, it's becoming less and less valuable with Open Door and Redfin and whatever it may be. And like commissions are dropping and getting lower. And I've heard I don't know if this is true or not, but like Seattle, it's like no buyer's agent commission or 1%. Just curious on like, if that makes sense, like just how you view the future of all this with brokerage and all the different brokerages.
Yeah, there's it's been evolving and changing, and will continue to evolve and change. I believe there'll always be a place for an agent, because there's always that need, especially from an advisor or counseling type perspective. There's in a lot of ways, there's things that you can do things yourself, but with certain things such as the purchase or sale of someone's largest asset, they usually want that trusted advisor there. Now, at the same time, there's a lot of platforms that are providing services to consumers that agents traditionally have provided. Being able to buy your home, being able to sell your home. And that will continue on. And so, consumers will have more and more options. What agents traditionally have been really good at is adapting and morphing into whatever the new rules of the game are. Mm-hmm. So, the good agents are the ones now that are bringing those options to the consumer, not having, hey, those options are over there, what I do is over here, and what I do is better than those, so you shouldn't do those. Instead of embracing those and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer or Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's 4 ways that we can help you with the sale of your home. Yep. Let's figure out which one makes the most sense for you. Mm-hmm. There is and has been downward pressure on commissions, partly just because of technology advances and the efficiencies that create. And the pressures that it puts on to the industry, with a lot of outside companies coming into the industries and having those options that I mentioned, but also because we've just gone through like 10 years of a strong, and the last 3 years super strong, sellers market, and in those type of markets, there's always downward pressure too, because it's easier to sell a home. So who a consumer chooses to help them is less important, right. And thus, if they can find someone that'll do it for less, that's and the newer agents can't compete with the more experienced or higher skilled agents. So the only way they can compete is to offer their services for less. So all those things put downward pressure on commissions, on top of the fact that it's just happening and evolving that way, anyways. So other revenue streams, Matt, you mentioned it, and I think it's super important, and not just earning wages through commissions, but also building wealth through investing. Mm-hmm. And way too many real estate agents don't own real estate, or don't own enough real estate, or don't take advantage of the opportunities that they come across, because they aren't financially in a position to be able to do it, because they haven't built their business to a level where they have that enough cash flow to make investments. And so those things will, I think, become more and more important. And
Nice.
the brokerages of the future, the ones that will offer things like that, or more services and more ways to help agents do more business. In the past it was commission splits.
Right.
Who the highest commission split is. But as we move forward, agents are going to need more than just a good commission split. And the smart ones are willing to pay for it. They're willing to accept less for other opportunities. It's
so tricky. And that's our goal, what you just alluded to in a sense. And there's so many models, right? And I'm fascinated by, and tell me your thought on this, but I kind of look at KW, and they built this amazing company. And it's really cool that it started in Austin. And my understanding is that a lot of the EXP guys came from KW, and I'm just so curious how big of a hit that was to KW. But then there's real brokerage, and there's new ones every day. There's now maybe who knows, right? A better version of EXP. It's is there going to be a couple of these that work out?
And our business, just by nature of being primarily independent contractors, and the fact that it's a very personalized type business, is very fragmented, and I don't
very what
fragmented.
Okay. Yep.
And I don't see that changing. It's not going to be a winner take all. It's and it doesn't need to be, because the market's big enough that can support several large, highly profitable companies. EXP was a big hit to Keller Williams because basically, whether it's Gary at Keller Williams or Glenn at EXP, they may not like this comment or totally agree with it, but EXP is just a newer, better model or version of Keller Williams.
That's what I'm saying. And then it's how do we make that better? It's that's what's going on, and that's how we are. We're hey, how can we be very similar to EXP in some ways, but then add on hey, come here and buy properties with us.
Or do both. It doesn't always have to be better. I mean, I said this, I don't know, probably 2018 or 19. I made the comment in an interview like this that if Gary was starting Keller Williams today, it would look a lot more like EXP than it does Keller Williams. Because what Glenn did was just came up with a better, smarter, more contemporary model than something that was started in 1983. Will there be a better version of EXP? There might be, but then you got to ask yourself: does the world need a better version? Right? How many more KW or EXP knockoffs do we need? Right? There's companies that may be able to grow to a certain size by doing that, but if something's really working well, then the goal is, okay, how can they make it work even better?
Right.
And how can they make it even more advantageous for the agents, to be a place where more agents want to be and fewer want to leave. And that's always the goal of the large companies, or even the small companies out there.
Do you think, just from a straight business person perspective, and I don't know if you can touch on all this stuff or not, because you work it.
If I can't, I won't.
But I've always really looked at how companies innovate, and you have to be getting better, right? And I would imagine that KW feels that way. So I'm curious on EXP starting is was KW just constantly trying to get better, and maybe did they just not see this aspect of it, and it was more, this is just creative, or were they just kind of hey, we're the big dog, we're good, and never saw something like that potentially happening?
No, there was never any complacency. There were, when I was there, it was my primary focus, which was to change and innovate, and Gary was equally focused on that. There were some others in leadership positions who didn't want to change, and that created internal conflict, and was frankly part of the reason why I chose to not be there. In an organization, if everyone isn't rowing in the same direction or with the same vision or the same goals, then it becomes hard to change and evolve and innovate. I think there's been, since I've left, there's been so much change there. I would hope that now they're in a position where they can be focused on that, and hopefully will do. And I think they are trying to do things to do that. It's not just the desire or willingness to do it. It's also the structure, the underlying structure of the company. When you're a franchise organization with independently owned and operated franchises, there's certain things you can do really well, and there's certain things that are really hard to do.
Right.
And so they can, whatever they do has to be within the framework of what they created. And another company, since we're talking about EXP, using them as an example, that doesn't have the franchises and all those independently owned and operated people that they have to work with. They can do things and maneuver much more effortlessly and quicker than a company that has that different type of structure.
Yeah, it is fast. I mean, I can't imagine. I don't know how big it was. A massive hit for KW. Like,
no, I mean, it was, sure, they felt it, but I don't know that I'd call it massive. I mean, the company didn't. They still continued to grow, but just at a declining rate because they were losing more people than ever before, to EXP. But EXP isn't made up of all former Keller Williams people. There's people from every brokerage there. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm sure Gary and the company, I'm sure it stung or continues to sting.
Well, and partially, because like you alluded to, like, maybe Gary would do EXP, like it seems like it's the more improved version in some sense of, like, and maybe it was a big chunk, but even just psychologically of, like, dude, these guys got it figured out better than us.
Yeah.
Like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
But they seem to be doing fine.
Yeah, I mean, time will tell. We'll see. Over the next few years, what a really good market hides inefficiencies. It hides any defects and any of those things. When the market starts to shift, which we'll start to see, and we are starting to see, it'll expose companies and platforms and brokerages and agents a lot, and then you'll start to see what's really working and not working.
I'm fascinated. Like, I started in 2012, and I was in Texas, and it's just been hot ever since.
Yeah.
And I'm always just like, man, as much as I like to think I've been around the block, I've been doing it a decent amount of time and very committed to it, but there's this whole other world that I'm totally clueless to.
Well,
it's happening.
It's not for long. I mean, it's not going to change dramatically, especially here in this market, and not overnight. But it will shift, and it will change. There's just too much happening in the world for that not to happen, and it always does. And we go through cycles. That's
sure.
For people like yourself, it's you got to be, head on a swivel and eyes wide open to adapt quickly. For others who have been through multiple cycles, they already know what they're going to do, and they're prepared for it, and will take advantage of it. Every challenge is an opportunity, and that's the focus has to be on where the opportunity is, not on how hard it is or what's not working.
No, I mean, we both think that way, and we're like, my thought is like, hey, the true entrepreneurs will always succeed, and you'll thrive in a sense. I mean, because it's going to get harder, and if you're very serious about it, there's more market share to gain. Yep. But as I say that, people are like, you have no idea. I'm like, well, that's true. It's like I'm kind of like, hey, I'm wanting that to happen because I want to go and use our skill sets that we've been building.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess looking forward, big goals for you and ways we can help, or our listeners can help. I know you got the book that you said just came out.
Just launched a book called Dominant Thoughts. It's a relatively easy read, 118 pages. It's a business parable.
Show the camera real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. I bought that one on Amazon. I haven't got my author copies yet. It's that new. But we have a website, dominantthoughts.com. When I was younger, and I still read a lot of books. And some of the books I read early in my career were, business parables. The Richest Man in Babylon.
I love that book.
The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. And then later books like Who Moved My Cheese and My Iceberg's Melting, those type of books. And so this is that type of book. And I just took some of the things I've learned over the last 35 years, and each chapter of the story takes one of those lessons and weaves it through the story.
That's cool.
And by the end, it's anyone starting off their career, entrepreneurs. A lot of real estate teams and brokerages have been buying it for their agents and for their team members, which has been cool to see. But hopefully it's the type of book that'll make the type of impact in people that some of those books made on me.
That's great. How many hours do you think went into writing that book?
Way more than needed to be. Partly because I have a full-time job, and so but like a book like that probably could have been done in 3 or 4 months, but it took about a year. But it's not as I have a co-author who became my co-author because he called me and said, "Hey, I heard you might someday want to write a book." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I have the title, I have the URL, I even have the opening scene of how it starts. If you have all the content, I'll show you how to do it, and I have all the contacts, the guy that designed the cover, the publisher, everything." I said, "That's awesome. Yeah, I'll partner with you and do that." So if I didn't have Greg as a partner, it probably would have taken a lot longer and a lot more time and energy. But I had someone who's done it 30 or 40 times that was able to show me the right ways.
That's exciting. Yeah, I love those Richest Man, like different style.
Yeah,
I like those books.
Yeah,
and they're easy reads. And
yeah,
a lot of good wisdom in them. So excited to check it out.
What's one last question before we get out of here? What's one of your favorite things about being an advisor to many different companies? I'm sure it's kind of multi-tiered. Like with these podcasts, we get content, but we also get to learn. We get to make connections, right? And so I'm sure there's many different facets to being an advisor and helping people out. But you're an advisor for quite a few companies, correct?
It looks like more than there are, but yeah. Here's what I get. I get all those things that you just mentioned, Alex. But what I get most of all is the opportunity to make a difference or to help someone win, and I like winning. And so being able to contribute, being able to feel like you're making a positive impact, being able to feel like I'm making a positive impact is what I get most out of it.
Right. Awesome.
That's great, man. Any last thoughts, things you want to talk about, or ways we or our listeners can add value for you?
Look, I never come into anything with like what I can get out of it or what I want out of it. Here's my philosophy has always been the same. If I provide a lot of value, provide great results, then opportunities will come up, and I never worry about how or when, because the world's full of them, and it's just being aware enough to recognize it. So I would actually turn it around and say, look, if I can be of help,
thank you,
or to you guys or to anyone, feel free to reach out you can find me on DM me on Facebook or message me on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
All right, you switched it on us. All right, man. Chris Heller, guys, Real Estate Podcast. And if you have any comments or thoughts, share it with your friends. Give us some opinions. Reach out to Chris, and we're going to keep plugging away. So keep hustling. Take some of this advice, put it to use, and go get it. Peace.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.